Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so pleased that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze to talk to yet another fabulous new author today, a debut author, and I cannot wait for you to meet Julia Bartz. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 14 novels of suspense. My newest book just out, The House Guest, which is sort of Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise, just went into a second printing after 6 days on sale. So I'm extremely happy about that. And thank you all so much for your support of that book. I know you have made a huge difference in its success, and I'm really grateful to you all. I'm going to click over so I can see your comments as you arrive. Today, let me say that I have the absolute joy, I'm going to get the glare off this cover, of talking to you with Julia Bartz, the author of the brand new and fabulous The Writing Retreat, which, let me tell you before I tell you what the world thinks, I could not put this down. I will tell you that I was reading it on an airplane on book tour. And when the flight attendant said, please return your seat backs and tray tables to the full upright position in preparation for landing, I thought, no, I want to keep reading this. I'm not ready to land. I want to keep reading The Writing Retreat. So I cannot wait to talk to Julia about this. Here's Susie Baldwin. Welcome. And Michelle Conklin is here, and Shannon Hansen and Sherry Steuben. Catherine Holland is here. Pamela Fry-Priest and Lynn Hanneman is. You are all arriving to hear about this marvelous book, The Writing Retreat, by Julia Bartz. And if you don't take my word for it, which you should, but if you don't, this is an instant New York Times bestseller, an instant New York Times bestseller, which must be the best word, the best phrase anybody could ever hear. When did you hear? Welcome, Julia. And when did you hear about this mad success?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I just want to say again, that's kind of the highest praise, that you were on a flight and actually did not want the flight to end because you were reading it. I love that. Yeah, it was such a crazy day. I had tea with a friend and was literally walking to the grocery store to get cat food. And my agent texted me and she was like, call me immediately. So I called her and she shared the news, and we were both just kind of like jumping up and down and screaming. I was just like on the sidewalk in the middle of Brooklyn. So people probably were a little confused what was going on. But yeah, it was such a great feeling. And then I spoke with my editor as well. We had a phone call and did the same exact thing.
I'm picturing you on the streets of Brooklyn, jumping up and down about being an instant New York Times bestseller. And I'm thinking that Brooklyn might be one of the few places in the world where if someone said, are you okay? And you said, yes, my book just made the New York Times bestseller list, they might just say, oh, okay.
Yeah, they would just keep walking.
Definitely so. But I was absolutely cheering when I read the news. Congratulations, and amazingly well deserved. Has your mailbox just filled up? Has your text just filled up with people just being so happy for you?
Yeah, I mean, people are so excited and so supportive. And I've even heard from some people from my past, like people that I like an ex-roommate reached out to me, an old coworker. So that's really cool too, just to be in touch with those people. But yeah, it's been such a whirlwind. It's been very exciting.
And it's continuing. Can I just ask you, what did your mom say?
Yeah, my mom was thrilled, and I think I asked her something like, how does it feel to have two like New York Times bestselling daughters? Because my sister, Julia Bartz, is also an author, and her last book, We Were Never Here, was on the New York Times bestseller list as well. And she is just so excited. I was kind of sharing with you before that she's in the midst of trying to help us set up a event for both of us this summer back in Wisconsin. So she's totally thrilled.
Your mom putting together an event about the books of her two New York Times bestselling daughters. That's a book in itself. Absolutely. And you know that Andy says this about you in her speeches now, in her interviews now. She gets to talk about you, her New York Times bestselling sister. So that seems great. Congratulations. And only on Crime Time, you all, would be able to bring you this marvelous news and this marvelous sistered team that writes separate books, but is each a New York Times bestseller. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, if you are new to Crime Time, you should know that A Mighty Blaze was started almost 3 years ago. Hope the cat got their food that day. You're like, meow.
He doesn't care what's happening. He needs his food.
That's a cat, right? I don't care, Mom, what you got.
Exactly.
I need my food. Anyway, Crime Time started, Prime Time on A Mighty Blaze started about 3 years ago by the fabulous powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt. And their point in creating this sort of hub for readers and writers is to keep us all talking about books and talking about writing and meeting new authors and reconnecting with your favorite authors and maybe finding a new favorite book, maybe the writing retreat by Julia Bartz. And we are giving away, well, we're not, I'm keeping this book, but Julia and her publisher are giving away a copy of the writing retreat to one lucky commenter. So leave a question for Julia, leave a comment, just general applause or admiration. You know the deal in the chat, and one of you will win a copy of the writing retreat. And the rest of you should just go buy it because it's really terrific. Anyway, Sherry says, I'm from Iowa, would love to go to an event in the Midwest. And that would be in Wisconsin, where you're from, right?
Exactly. Yeah, Sherry, maybe you can travel, or hopefully, we'll have more events there at some point.
I love that. I love it. The Magical Mystery Tour of the Bartz Sisters. Another good title. Another good one. Let me tell you a little bit about Julia Bartz, a tiny bit about Julia herself. Julia Bartz is a Brooklyn-based writer and therapist. Her debut thriller, The Writing Retreat, received starred reviews from Kirkus and Booklist and was chosen by the Book of the Month Club, yikes, that's so fabulous, as their February debut pick. Library Reads also chose The Writing Retreat as their top pick of February 2023. And it is indeed an instant New York Times bestseller. And the adulation is just coming through in the comments. So let's finally talk about The Writing Retreat. You can see all my little notes that I'm going to talk to you about from the book. But on one level, it's this cinematic, iconic, classic, locked mansion competition novel. Talk a little bit about the story on that level.
Sure. So the story is about a woman named Alex who has pretty much given up on her dreams of becoming a published author when she receives the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to attend a writing retreat that's being put on by her favorite author, the horror novelist Rosa Vallow. When Alex arrives, she finds out that not only is this a writing retreat, it's also a writing contest. So Rosa is asking all of the attendees to write an entire novel from scratch during the month of February, and her favorite one is going to receive a $1 million book deal. So Alex buckles down, she gets an idea, but she soon realizes that there's strange things happening around Rosa's estate, which is called Blackbriar. And when one of the other attendees disappears, Alex has to race against the clock to find out what's really going on at this writing retreat, or she might go missing too.
It's great. And when some places, when the setting is a place called Blackfriar, this cannot be good. You know something is going to happen. And Rosa is such an interesting character because Alex reveres her. I mean, this is her author of authors. Why did you decide to make Rosa be the lure for Alex? What was it about their relationship that makes this work so well? I mean, the power dynamic is so interesting.
Right. I think that I've always had certain writers that I've followed who I really look up to and who have become basically mentors kind of in my mind. But it's definitely a parasocial relationship where it's very one-sided. One of those authors, her name is Natalie Goldberg, and I started reading her books, which are kind of like about writing, but also memoirs, when I was 12 years old. And, at that time I was living in the suburbs of Wisconsin, outside of Milwaukee, and just, yearning for something more and reading about Natalie's life. She was this queer activist, Zen Buddhist writer living in New Mexico, really living life to the fullest. Like, she really inspired me, and she actually inspired my writing practice. And I started free writing almost every day. And then many years later, I actually got the chance to interview her I was running a literary blog called Bookstalker. So I think this was in my early 30s. So again, many years had passed, and it was so bizarre to actually speak to this person who I'd again, just like followed and thought of as this mentor for such a long time. And it was a little bit anticlimactic. I mean, she was very friendly and very nice, but she was very like casual. She was like eating something during the interview. And it just really struck me again, like how interesting that type of relationship is, like with an author that you really admire. And then also when I was, again, doing the literary blogging, I was going to events constantly, like all the time. And there were certain authors who they just had this charisma, and I just felt so intrigued by them and just drawn to them. Some examples are Mary Gateskill, Rachel Kushner, and a little bit later on, Otessa Moshfegh. I saw her. And I was just like so interested in them and wondered what it would be like to meet them and maybe even like learn from them in person. So those were kind of the origins of Rosa.
And it's interesting too, because one of the things about that, about admiring or even revering someone or following them or book stalking them, is that a lot of it is what you created who they are. I mean, that's not who they really are. It's your imagination making a persona for them, and then you begin to believe that that's what they really are, and that's what charisma like Hank's.
Yeah, totally.
I pay Trisha to come and say comments like that. Trisha Blanchett. That's so. I'm now blushing. That you created. Alex has created this persona of who Rosa is, and so. And this won't give anything away, obviously, is that, it's a process of Alex realizing who Rosa really is and what she's really like and what she really wants.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I wanted to push things even a little bit further. I also became interested in this idea of like a mentorship that verges on what's the word? Maybe like slightly inappropriate, or like the boundaries are crossed, and having a mentor who can lead you to create your greatest work or destroy you in the process. And for that, there were actually certain movies that I was thinking of, like Whiplash was one of those. Silence of the Lambs was another one, also one of my favorite movies. And even Misery, I kind of think of in that way. So that was also something that I wanted to explore.
Well, it's the power balance, isn't it? That what someone wants and how far they'll go to get that thing. And when the mentee wants something, how far will she go? When the mentor wants something, how far will she go? And it's the clash of those two. And that's exactly what happened in the writing retreat. But it's not just those two. Alex is at this mansion, at Blackfriar, because of being involved in a competition to be there, and other people come too. So there's this wonderful ensemble class. Talk a little bit about that competition, what that is, and how they all wind up there.
Mm-hmm. So Alex and Ren. So Ren is Alex's ex best friend, frenemy, I guess you would say. And the beginning of the story actually starts with Alex going to a book reading and being afraid that she's going to see Ren there. And I won't share too much about what happened and why they had a friend breakup. But that relationship was at the very heart of the book. And I'm happy to share the very first iteration of this book was actually a NaNoWriMo book that I started back in late 2015, so a long time ago. And it was kind of a different feel to it at that point. But those two I always knew would be, the book would be kind of written around them. The three of them, I think, Alex, Ren, and then Rosa. And the other characters, I think I came up with them later, but it was just a matter of figuring out, there's more attendees that are at this retreat. And as a writer, you want to kind of push people in different directions and have them be, as different as possible from each other. So that was something that was fun to just kind of explore as I was working on the plot.
Well, you completely differentiate among the characters. We instantly know who each one is and what they look like and how they are and what their personalities are, and also how they pair off with each other, and how the group dynamics of who's friends with who, just like in a clique in high school, how that works out. But the point is that these 5 women have been brought to the mansion. They've been told that they have to write a book in a month, and that the best one will get something. It's a prize. It's a competition. And I laughed when you said NaNoWriMo. You all, if you don't know, it's National Novel Writing Month, where you're supposed to write 50,000 words in a month, which is ridiculous and impossible, but the pressure. So think about if you got a big prize for that, how would that be? Did you, when you're writing these people, how did you decide who was who and what was what? And when you're writing them, how did you channel their behavior?
Yeah, I did a lot of exercises to kind of figure out who they were, even to the point of I just remembered this and was sharing it with another interviewer. I went through and figured out all their astrological signs. So again, just figuring out everyone's personality, but also everyone's backstory. And I think the book really explores both people's motivations and people's trauma. So that was something that I wanted to think about too. Like, how have these people been affected by their family? How have they been affected by any generational trauma, societal trauma, etc.? So that was something that, again, was just kind of organically built.
Yes, but that's a great idea. You gave yourself a structure, a way to think about if someone is Scorpio or someone is a Libra, that there's, if you believe that, they're going to behave in a certain way. Who's going to give up? Who's going to be fearless? Who's going to be confident? Who's going to be manipulative? That all comes through so gorgeously. And talking about your good idea, you came out of NaNoWriMo. You have something in the book that I wanted to read, which I love. She's thinking about how to write this novel in a month. And she says, I knew what it felt like to have a good idea. The concept would trigger something, a little ember deep down in the belly. You'd have to be careful not to hold it too tightly, but you could feel it, the expansive glow of all the possibilities. But these ideas, the ones she was having, were dead, inert. I was digging around in the mud, but finding nothing. That sounds so authentic about a writer's search to find a good idea. When you said that this came out of NaNoWriMo, when you had to come up with something, was that from you? Was that from your soul, that how it feels to have a good idea and how it feels to search and know that they're wrong?
Definitely. Part of the reason that I wrote this book, well, I wrote it for many reasons, but one of them was to explore the process of writing and what it feels like to be a writer. So I think it's interesting to people who maybe have not written fiction before, just how almost mystical it can be, where either, like in the book, Alex has this vision or scene and is often running with the book after having like over a year of writer's block where she can't write anything. Like sometimes it just takes a little idea to kind of spark things. And the process of writing itself is, it's just really weird, or I wanted to explore this idea of channeling because it really does feel like you're kind of watching scenes play out or you're hearing dialogue, conversations. Sometimes characters will do something that is surprising to you, the author. So it's a crazy feeling, but I think that's why a lot of us keep going with it because it's really fun.
I listened to an interview. I was at an interview at Harvard at Sanders Theater between Lee Child and Stephen King, of all pantheonic interviews, and they each said separately that there were times when they were really in the zone, when they really felt that they were just transcribing what they were seeing or what a character was, or that they were channeling a character. And you can't make that happen. It just does or doesn't. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, again, if you try to force things, it doesn't always work. But if you can land on something that feels very exciting to you and you feel just kind of like some energy about this idea, and I think oftentimes those types of ideas have something to do with our own history or our own trauma, something that we really need to unpack and explore. I think that's what to go with.
And that's one of the things that happens in the writing retreat. Rosa encourages the women in this competition to dig deep into their own past and figure out what they can explore and what they can develop from their own lives. But readers often ask writers, where do you get your ideas? And this is the magic question. This is the mystical question that each of the women in this competition have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, so the thing is that the other thing about this book that I love so much is that how it explores how other people are going to judge what's good about your book, and how difficult it is as an author to decide whether someone who's giving you criticism or critiquing your novel or your writing, whether they're right, and what does right mean. And you explore that so gorgeously in the writing retreat. Talk a little bit about what your thought process was about that, comparing what a person writes to what someone thinks about what they write.
So another reason that I wrote this book was, and actually to be clear, I didn't know if I was actually going to write this book, because I had written 2 novels before. This is actually the 3rd novel that I've written, and even though I put a lot of time and a lot of energy into trying to get the agent and get the book deal, it didn't happen for those 2 books. So when I got the idea for this book, I was excited about it. And also I asked myself, like, can I go through this process again? And, it's actually very common. Authors usually do write 1 or 2 or more. I think Stephen King wrote like 5 books before Carrie, books that don't see the light of day, and you just kind of put them back in the drawer. But again, it's laborious process. And at the time I was also transitioning into a new career. I was becoming a therapist, after thinking to myself, like, maybe this whole writing thing isn't going to work out for me after all. And so I really had to pause and kind of consider if I wanted to move forward with it. And I decided that the only way that I could move forward was to really focus on the process and use it to really explore this idea of being a quote unquote failed writer or frustrated writer. And also use it, again, I was studying to be a therapist, so also using it as kind of a psychological exercise to explore the darkest corners of my psyche. And that made the process a lot more enjoyable. And I was able to focus more on that instead of the outcome. And maybe ironically, I think that's what led to it becoming, what it is, and why it's connected to publishers.
I mean, the darkest recesses of the human psyche, that's what this house is all about.
Yeah.
And then the women in the house are exploring their own dark recesses of their own psyches and why they do what they do. And apropos of absolutely that, 2 people in this book, I'm going to just sort of leave the names out. 2 people in this book are talking about that very thing. And one of them is talking about how I thought this was my only chance to be a published author. Yeah. And someone else says, but you're such a great writer. And she says, you think that matters? She stared at me in disbelief. You want to know how many books I've written? How many agents and editors have told me I'm so incredibly talented, but they're not quite the right person for me, or that I feel too niche, or that my audience won't be wide enough. I mean, there's this, who as an author hasn't had that disappointment? And who as an author hasn't had to decide, just as you're talking about, whether to go on? I mean, so I think it was Pamela Fry-Priest who was saying, I'm glad you persisted. Mm-hmm. I mean, that sort of cri de coeur in the book is so relatable, not only for authors, but for everyone in whatever profession they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And something that I think was also really helpful for me was to be in a new career that was also exciting and something that was providing me with fulfillment, because I think, there's this idea for creative people that, just keep going and you'll get there. And, like, it's just a matter of time. And that may be true, that it is just a matter of time, but that time could be a long time from now. Our society doesn't always support its creative people, particularly people from marginalized communities. I mean, I have a lot of privilege as a white woman. So I really encourage everyone who's an artist of some kind to find joy in the work, and maybe even find other places in your life where you can also have that fulfillment.
Did you know this was working as it progressed? If you just joined us, you lucky people, we're talking about the Writing Retreat, the instant New York Times bestseller by the fabulous debut novelist Julia Bartz. Did you at some point in the book, did you think, this could work? What was that like? Or did you?
Honestly, I don't think that I did. I felt like a bit burned. And even with this book, I mean, as you were talking about before, like the reaction or the response to it is so subjective because, there are agents who said no to the writing retreat. There are publishers who said no to the writing retreat. And so I think that we really can't depend on that external validation. Like we really have to, again, find enjoyment and fulfillment ourselves in what we're doing.
And in the process, and that's so wise, and we should just stop for a second and remember that, because we tend to sort of gloss over those kinds of, we say, yeah, we're fine. We're just gonna worry. Did you know the ending of this book? Did you have a vision of how it would end?
I did have an idea. So this book also is the first one that I plotted very carefully. The first two were more, we can divide authors into pantsers and plotters, people who kind of fly by the seat of their pants to figure out the story, and people who plot. I'd actually be curious what you are, because I would assume plotter, but maybe not. I always I get surprised sometimes by people's answers. But yeah, for this book, I really wanted it to have a very strong spine. And I wanted, yet another reason I wrote this, I really wanted it to be the book that I would want to read. And I love suspense. I love horror movies. I love thriller novels. So I really wanted to see if I could turn up that sense of suspense and dread up as far as I could possibly go. And, knowing I did, know what certain characters were up to, even if that's not revealed early on. So I knew that it was going to be a pretty wild ending.
And the whole book is just absolutely page-turningly, wonderfully suspenseful. I mean, gasp-worthy scenes and shocking twists, not only at the end, but throughout. And I'll get to the plotter and pantser answer in a second, but apropos of what you're saying about the ending, it's so interesting because that's another place that I marked in the book. And I won't give away anything, so I'm leading over a little bit here. But she's thinking about the ending of the book. And she says, the ending was really my only leverage. The ending glowed inside me, hidden like a small pearl. Sure, someone could try to finish the novel herself, but it wouldn't be the ending, the one that already existed, buried underneath the surface, regardless of whether it was uncovered. Only I had access to that. Now, I just got goosebumps reading it again, and goosebumps reading it the first time, because it sounds like you think, or she thinks, that there is a story. And part of it is just letting that bloom and letting it see what happens. And part of it is cultivating and discovering what the real ending is, a real ending. Can you talk about how you feel about that?
Mm-hmm. I love that you brought that up, because I do feel that way. And again, I think the process of writing is kind of almost like this mystical pursuit. And I was speaking with another interviewer who was saying that some author referred to it as like a story fairy would kind of land on your shoulder, with this idea, and it's up to you whether or not you pick it up and go with it. And I think to a lot of authors, the story does feel like this thing that already exists, and we're just trying to uncover it. I think Stephen King wrote about how it's almost like you're uncovering, it's like an archaeological dig into finding all the bones and uncovering everything and seeing the whole structure laid out in front of you. That feels like it does already exist somehow.
And it's interesting because you can try to mine or dig up the ending, and you can find I'm pushing away dirt here. I know you can't see that. You can find a shallow ending. And you can accept that, or you can dig a little deeper and find a deeper ending, or you can persist and find an even deeper ending. And then you get the ending where it almost brings tears to your eyes, what the real ending is.
Yeah, I think endings are so hard. I don't know. How do you feel about that when you're working on endings?
Well, this is perfect, because in answer to your question, I'm the biggest pantser in the world. I have no idea. From when I sit down at the computer every day, I have no idea. None. I type chapter 1. I think, okay, let's see. And
I'm
so, no,
I'm
don't even.
by that.
If I could have an outline, I can't tell you how happy I would be. I would love an outline. But I think it's because after all these years as a reporter, I've been a reporter for 43 years.
Mhm.
When I'm going out in search of the story every day, in search of what really happened. And I think that might be the same sort of metabolism, how the same rhythm of how I write. I'm just in search of the story. I'm in search of what happened. But exactly as you're saying about that there is a story, I know there is a story. I'm just trying to find it. And
Right.
so I think that may be why I'm a pantser.
Mhm.
But the ending, I mean, at some point, as a pantser, you've written 7/8 of the book, and at some point you got to cut bait. You know, something's got to happen, and it's got to be the right ending. It's got to be and I writhe on the couch about it. I mean, I just say every time I say I can't think of this. I've created a mystery that I can't solve. Whatever, I don't know.
It's hard.
And
The hardest part.
yeah, and when I figured out the ending of The House Guest, I was by myself right here at this desk, and I stood up and applauded. I'm like, yeah, I got this. I figured this out. It can work either way. It can work.
That. Yeah. That's so
So
interesting.
go ahead.
I was just going to say it's so interesting because I had an interview with Danielle Girard, and I said the same thing to her, that I assume that you plot because you're doing like series. So that seems like so much to kind of keep in mind, and this like overarching story, and then like the story in each book. But she also said that she was a pantser. So yeah.
She's marvelous, Danielle Girard. If you haven't read her books, you should look for her. She's quite great. And she has a show called Killer Women, which is a wonderful interview show. Danielle Girard, if you don't know her, she lives in Montana, and she's amazing. So I'm just looking at all of your so many comments here today. Renee says the names of your characters. Let's take some questions now that I've segued into the chat. The names of your characters, says Renee, are unique. How did you come up with their names?
Thank you, Renee. That's such a good question. Honestly, it depends. Like, again, this book has been through so many drafts, again, going back to 2014. So I don't remember exactly the moments when I kind of figured out everyone's name, but oftentimes I have like a placeholder name that I will use, and then I change it later on if it doesn't feel right. And, sometimes I'll go on those like baby names websites and just kind of like, sometimes I'll be like, ooh, she's like an M name. Like I know that it starts with an M. So I go to the M's and I kind of look down, but I get name ideas from all over. Like I was walking home the other day and I saw a apartment for sale, and the name of the realtor, I was like, oh, that's a good name. So I just like took a little picture of that.
I will take that. That's very, love that. I mean, it's wonderful. And Trisha is saying, Trisha Blanchett, who is a fabulous writer in her own right, says, I'm only about halfway through the book, but I'm already afraid to ever again attend my writing workshop. It cannot be as scary as it cannot be as scary as this one. What was it like to come up with the increasing levels of danger and suspense? I mean, this book just goes from 0 to 60 and then just keeps going.
It was very exciting. I was also reading a lot of books about structure and about how to do just that, like where there need to be like revelations that happen throughout the book. And as you go further into the book, the revelations need to come faster and they need to be bigger. So that's something that I really kept in mind throughout the plotting of this.
I always think about it as like if you're a fairy tale character on the path on the way to find something, and somebody's leaving gold coins on the path, and you find a gold coin and you hope for the next one. And then what keeps you going is, oh, there's another one and another one and another one. You keep going faster and faster and faster to get to the end. So your gold coins were absolutely great along the way, like gasp worthy gold coins. What else? What other questions? Let me look. Oh, what was your favorite part? Yeah. Did you have a favorite part of writing this novel? Says Catherine Holland.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine, for that question. I think it actually was about the plotting and the story. And I think there's something so satisfying when you do land on the quote unquote like right thing to happen. And I will say also that when I plot, I usually plot up to like the midpoint and kind of right up to the midpoint, and then from there figure out what's happening for the back end of the book. So I think there were moments when I had again gotten to the midpoint. Now we're, what's happening, what's going on, someone is missing, other weird things are are happening to the characters, and they're trying to figure it out. And I think those moments of inspiration are just like, oh, like this is what they find, or this happens, or this person is actually doing this, even though they're saying this. Like those moments are just so enjoyable.
Yeah, I love that when you think, oh, that's kind of cool. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a good idea.
Exactly. Like your ending when you came up at the end of The House Guest. Like
I can still bring back the goosebumps. Absolutely. Yeah. Before we take more questions and give away a copy of this book, let me just say, as I was reading this, I was turning pages as fast as I could, as you know, and I was thinking, this is hilarious. This is wonderful. This is witty. This is realistic. Then it was over the top, and it was, so incredibly entertaining. But in the end, I felt different about it. I still beyond loved it. But after this entertaining, cinematic, crazy, wonderful, interesting novel, it felt to me like the whole book was really actually a big, powerful metaphor about what it really felt like to write a book. That it was a journey that all authors have been on, this sort of fear and the need for the idea and the hope and the ambition and the panic and the sort of whimsical decision-making process of the inexplicable world of publishing and what people want and your hopes and dreams and how difficult it is. The whole thing is so difficult, and you never know. It turned when I closed the book changed from being just hilarious, entertainingly wonderful, almost satirical horror locked room mystery novel into being a really powerful story and full of insight about being a writer. Am I making too much out of this? I mean, I was almost crying.
Yeah, no, you're making me feel like I'm going to start tearing up. Yeah, I mean that I'm so happy to hear that, because that was, I think writing this book, the realizations that Alex has at the end, towards the end, and just one of those, she says that if I write, even if nothing ever happens with my writing, that I'm still a writer. I think it really took me writing this entire book to come to that conclusion. And it was very empowering, and it was just, yeah, Alex does some things that I don't want to spoil, but she really shows that she feels, in her power after going through this process and feeling like a failure, or not as good as other people, or that she has to scrape and kind of bow down to Rosa to get anywhere. Like she ends up in a very different place, and I think I ended up there with her.
And I ended up there with her too. And I think it's really valuable. I mean, again, I don't want to take away from the fun and entertainment value of this book, which is major. But it is a profound statement, and it is revelatory at the end. And I wonder, I want to read one more thing before we do the book giveaway. In the end, which this doesn't give away anything, in the end, someone asks her for advice about what to do about success. Mm-hmm. And she says, just say thanks and hug people, I typed. It's truly all you need to do. And I just thought, oh, just say thanks and hug people. And how wonderful is that? How did it feel to write that?
Yeah, it felt great to write it. I mean, part of the reason that everything happening now, IRL, like in real life, to me, it feels so meta, because I really explored all of these different feelings and even outcomes within the book. Like the book starts at a book party and ends at a book party. And Alex talks at the first book party about like, what would it feel like to hold your own book in your hands? Like, I can't even imagine. And so when my, box of final books came to my apartment and I was doing just that, I was just like, this is so wild. So I think it was helpful too, to kind of imagine what it would be like. And, I was definitely not expecting this type of outcome to happen for the writing retreat, but it's such a good feeling.
It's amazing. I understand what you're saying about the meta-ness
Yeah.
of it, that I bet you're thanking a lot of people and hugging a lot of people at this point now. The Writing Retreat, an instant New York Times bestseller and an absolutely terrific book. Congratulations. And I love this.
Yeah.
The pages on the cover. Do you see? That's not me flipping the pages. That is how this cover is. And that is so brilliant.
Yeah.
Shannon says, what did you think when you saw that?
Well, it's so funny. I really liked it. I've been seeing on social media, some people don't like it and they feel kind of disturbed by it.
Because it's hurting the book?
I guess so, yeah. Which I guess I understand that. I like it.
Art. It's art. Okay, we won't even go there. And again, the whole thing is about people and what they think is good and how they talk about what good means. And oh golly, that's why we're all here. That is totally why we're all here. But we're also here to give away a copy. You are a copy of The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. And let's spin the wheel of fun. This is so great. To win a copy. Now watch this. We'll draw for a winner of The Writing Retreat. And here it goes. Click. Good. I love that.
Oh, this is so cool.
Isn't that hilarious? Margaret Pinard in the back room is running the show here, and she figured this out. I think she's such a genius for it. And the winner is Lynn Hanman. That is so great, Lynn. Thank you. Lynn is a great fan of Crime Time and A Mighty Blaze, so I'm so thrilled that you won today, Lynn. Before I say goodbye to the fabulous Julia, let me tell you that next week we are again double booked here on Crime Time. The only possible time that it's good to be double booked is here on Crime Time, when we have two shows. At 3 o'clock, we'll have the brilliant J.T. Ellison with her new novel, It's One of Us, which is so touching and so personal. And if you haven't read this, you will after you hear J.T. Ellison talk about this great psychological thriller. And then at 4, William Landay and his new novel, which came out today, All That Is Mine, I Carry With Me. This is Bill Landay's first novel after he wrote Defending Jacob. It's his 4th novel. And if you write Defending Jacob, which was on the New York Times bestseller list for 1 million weeks, nobody can even count how many weeks. How do you write a novel after that? What do you do? And this took him years to write. And it is just as good as Defending Jacob. So I can't wait for you to listen to the fabulous Bill Landay and the fabulous J.T. Ellison next week, right here at Crime Time at 3 and 4 p.m. Be there, be there, be there. You do not want to miss that. Today, we've been talking with Julia Bartz about The Writing Retreat. I will say it one more time, the instant New York Times bestseller. Julia, thank you for being with us today. I hope you enjoyed it.
I had so much fun. Thanks so much, Hank.
Thank you. And good luck on your book tour, and good luck with your sister act with your mom in the Midwest. I wish I could go to that. Maybe I can. You all, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for being here today. And we will see you next week on Crime Time. Until then, remember, it is always safe inside a book. And we'll see you next time.